Hello, friends. We are live now. Thank you all for joining. And feel free to introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Katie. I work at Circle CI as the technical community manager.
And my name is Dave Stokes. I'm a community manager for MySQL products at Oracle.
Hi guys, my name is Bhavin Patel. I'm a solution architect at OutSystem.
Hi everyone, I'm Ted Pennings. I'm a product engineer, a front-end engineer at Lightstep.
Hello, I'm Cliff Jenkins. I'm a part-time instructor with We Can Code It and a senior developer at Alliance Data Systems.
Hi, I'm Brandon Rockwell. I'm one of the coordinators of the conference. I help with logistics and operations and those kind of things.
Okay, so we will get rolling. So it's an open question to all, right? So today we have various changes, the tech landscape is keeping on changing, and developers, they always have to learn X, and by the time they learn X, you get Y, and by the time you learn Y, there is another Z. So my question today to all of you is what is your suggestion for developers to stay relevant in tech today?
Give up all hope, ye who enter here. When I started programming back in the last century, you needed to know a text editor, you needed to know your compiler and maybe a linker, and you learned how to put in trace points for when your code went bad to kind of dump out variable points. I look now at the young developers coming up, and not only do they have to know their language of choice, JavaScript, some sort of front-end framework, some sort of back-end framework, some sort of database, some CI stuff, some debugging frameworks, how to do stuff off GitHub, how to put it all in the cloud, how to all coordinate it, and how to get it all off of cell phone. The learning curve has definitely spiked the past several years. So it's one of those things where there's no way you can keep track of every new thing that's going on. So best you can do is pick 2 or 3 things that you think you might be able to put your fingers around and hold on to, and just enjoy the ride.
That's really funny that you say that, David, because I'm for lack of a better, I came to code later in life. So I am still a relatively new developer, 4 or 5 years. And I think that I totally agree. It's very overwhelming landscape. My approach, I guess, or that engineers recommended to me when I started was that I really tried to focus on the foundations. If I'm going to learn, let's just say React, I'm going to learn a tool, but is there the underlying sort of philosophy of why I'm organizing things in this manner? I found that to be more easier to take with me to other technology. So I would say that if you're really learning a tool, also learn the sort of philosophy that goes along with that tool, because you may have more opportunity to sort of take that with you than the actual tool itself.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Advice that I give to early on engineers is to find something you're interested in kind of early on, and then stick with it for a while and get a lot of depth there. And that process of getting a lot of depth teaches you a lot about how to learn things in depth. And then once you've done that, you not only know something really well, but you know how to learn something really well. So you can apply that to other things.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say something else you can do is when you're at a conference like this one, look at the schedule and find something you know absolutely nothing about that isn't something that's going to be a hot trending topic for the next 6 weeks and then disappear. And even if you don't know anything about it, it's a complete tangent away from what you're doing. Invest an hour of your time, 30 minutes of your time, and go in and sit in that session and learn something different.
So I'll take this a little different direction, though, a little philosophical, right? Because a lot of people call me jack of all trade, master of none. So I'll put that myself in that category, right? But just to make sure that we stay relevant in the ever-changing environment itself, I would say start with embracing the change. Don't fear the change, right? Because the change is going to come regardless. if you just look at the front-end technologies, right, man, there is some variation of it. It comes out almost every other month, right? And particularly out of West, there's new framework which has been wildly successful for one company, and they became open source, and now there's a gold rush to learn that because that's going to solve world's problem. That's not necessarily the case, right? So if you really understand one technology, the learning the next one is going to be easy, right? So I would say just don't fear that, instead embrace that. And the second one is, I would say, is focus on your talent rather than actual skill, right? So soft skill in terms of how you learn things, because everybody learns things differently. What are you good at, right? So I personally think, and a lot of people disagree as well, I have a very analytical skill in terms of understanding the problem. I think that's my skill and has worked so well so far, right? Knock on wood. But just focus on that skill as well, or talent, I should say, as well. And learning the technology is gonna, that's an evolving process. That's not gonna end, right? That's always gonna come with you, right? Because you are in that field, it's gonna change. But let's keep our mind sharp in terms of what we possess, and that will kind of guide you through the taking the next skill set, right?
I'm curious, Cliff, you said you're a part-time instructor, right? Do you feel like you have to teach people about this sort of question?
I do, definitely, and I've been asked that question many a time. And I think one of the biggest things that the question that comes about is like, how do we learn so many different technologies? And one of the things that I tell the students is that don't fear. Learn, as been mentioned, learn one core technology. Know the basics of that technology, because when you learn other technologies, it becomes easier. But I also have to remind them that you cannot, and the key word here is become complacent. You cannot become complacent with the technology that you're learning right now. You must be willing to break your fear of getting outside of the technology that you know, and to go out and to learn other things. For instance, I attended the conference here last year. I'm not a JavaScript developer by no means, but I went outside my comfort zone to learn more things about JavaScript, because I don't want to become complacent. JavaScript is becoming the beast that it is, and you don't want to be left behind when it eventually does overtake some of the other mainstream programming languages that exist out there. So as far as students are concerned, I definitely let them know, hey, don't become complacent. Find your comfort zone, as Ted said, find your comfort zone and stick with it. I'm a jack of all trades, master of nothing either. But the biggest thing that I know that I do on a lot of occasions is I dabble with a lot of different technologies, and I found that some technologies just don't meet my, don't have a taste for it or palate for it. But at least I dabbled in it, just so that if I have a conversation with you, Katie or David or whomever, if there might be a technology that you are strong with, at least I can have a intelligent conversation with you about it and learn some things as well.
Part of the way of learning is learning how to break stuff and then fix it so it works again. So never be afraid to break stuff. Second thing is learn how to read documentation, and better yet, learn how to write documentation. It's often, I get hundreds of people each year coming to me, how do I learn SQL? How do I learn to run in a database? How do I learn to do something like that? And it's not that they don't have the mental capabilities, they just haven't learned how to read the documentation and go out and experiment. And like I said before, you learn a lot, especially as a junior developer, by breaking stuff that someone else has developed and then fixing it so that you actually can get it running again. So don't be afraid to break stuff.
I'll add one thing onto what David said. Before you break something in production, like try a rollback once and know how long it takes, because that can be stressful. But if you know how long it takes and you know how to do it, it can be like not a big deal.
Two common general goals you'll hear most developers tell you: make backups, and lots of them, and learn how to use the source control system. And no matter what you do, you're going to find yourself late at night one night because the source control system failed you and the backups failed you, and you're trying to remember what you wrote 4 hours before.
One tip on that, Git has the ref log. So there's the regular log and there's the ref log, and the ref log lists like every single commit ever. If you have a bad rebase, go look in the ref log.
Excellent point. So kind of to follow along that line of thinking, the next question is, I'll ask Cliff first, and then and everybody else can chime in. So as a new developer, what advice would you give if they come to you and they say, yeah, like I understand, I want to learn, or I need to be able to step out of my comfort zone, but I really want to have a plan for what job to look for to start off, or just what's the next thing. Do you have any specific advice for somebody who asked that kind of question, like about having a plan, or should they just not even have a plan and just focus on finding the next thing and adopting it?
Brandon, definitely need to have a plan, because those who fail to plan, if you don't plan, you fail to plan, you plan to fail, as the saying goes. Definitely have a plan. Those that are looking for a specific role, say they may approach me and I may not know, specifically a front-end developer. Hey, we may have, as developers, we definitely have a network. We need to put individuals, new developers, junior developers, we need to put them in front of individuals that we know that can advise them on the plan that they have taken to get where they needed to go, whether it's just technical or just career-wise. We need to put them in front of, and that's the start of a plan there, so that they can speak with those individuals to understand and know, hey, is this the technology that I want to be involved with? Yes, we definitely get into a time period right now where everybody, it seems like all employers want to have some type of full stack developer. But unfortunately, not all of us are front end and not all of us are back end developers, and very few of us know how to intermix and do both of them. So I advise and instruct that, hey, find that mentor, find an individual that you can speak with, that can lay out how they got there, and evaluate what it is that you would like to do, what you want to do, and move forward from that standpoint.
Go to your local user group meetings and ask questions of folks where they're working. What are you doing? How'd you get there? What are you looking for? Gee, how do I learn that? By the way, if anyone's been in the business for more than 10 years and they're still programming in the original language they started in, there's something wrong.
Sometimes I tell people to find more than one mentor so that they have mentors for different areas. Maybe one that's like career growth and one that's like technical matter, only because sometimes it can be hard to find somebody with all of that in one, or who has the time to do it all. And then also you get to see more different types of engineers. I was very lucky that I knew a lot of engineers when I was learning to code. So I had the ability to kind of get a feel for what they did. I knew a lot of Ruby and Rails developers at the time. And then I started learning more about front end. Then I got a job at a database company, so I learned about that instead. But they were all really helpful foundations. So I think that like some really good advice is to talk to as many different job titles as you can, because they're different, like all over the place.
I agree with Katie. That's also network with different roles, right? It doesn't have to be software engineer or architect, or even go outside in terms of look at the different role in terms of how you become a product manager, for example, right? Because the perspective will change from role to role, and you are better equipped to make a better decision when you look at those different perspectives.
Yeah, and it'll make you better at your role too. Like if you spend some time with your product managers or like the salespeople and like customer success people, you'll like learn how people use the product and what's like broken, and you'll find little things. Like in a past job, I found that there were some places where like we weren't using color to indicate that like things were like bad. So like I added some red and people thought it was better, and it was like a simple change.
Awesome. So next question, Ted, what would you suggest to developers and how they can stay relevant and maybe even stand out in today's world with this constantly changing front end landscape specifically?
Yeah, going back to the last question, I think it's important to like have this like network of people to give you like advice on technical and like professional growth, like soft skills and stuff. But it's also important to like assess the strengths of your peers, so you know like where to go when you have like a certain kind of problem, and when you want to learn something, you also know where to go. It can also help to let you focus. Like I'm really lucky that over the last like 4 years, I've worked with like different people who are great at Webpack, and I still know nothing about Webpack, and I'm like thankful for that. If I have to learn something about Webpack, like I definitely will, but I'm so thankful that like other people specialized in that I've worked with. The last thing I'll say on that is like read a lot of code. Like writing code's important, but reading code I think is even more important. So like read the code that your colleagues are writing, like PRs and stuff. Like go through and take a look. Read change logs for the libraries you care about. If you see anything interesting in the change log, go look into it. Maybe even go look at the code to see how they did that.
A friend of mine has a code review with his developers, and he tells them each to bring one piece of code that they wrote that they like, piece of code they wrote that they don't like, and something they found in their repository that just confuses the heck out of them. And sometimes it's a 15-minute meeting, you know, oh, that's some good code, that's some bad code, all that. Other times it leads them down to a theoretical discussion. Well, why do we do it this way? Why is our code legacy written this way? Why do we have this technical debt? Why is it this way? And the good thing about database, well, the good thing about most code developers is after about 6 months, you can look at a piece of code and tell if it's a piece of crap. In the database world, you can't look at a query and tell if it's good or bad or indifferent until you actually dig deeper. So in some respects, you not only have to know what the code does, but what's the layer beyond. A lot of times I see people setting up databases and they have not normalized their data, and you start asking, well, how are you going to use your data? Well, I want this ID to return this, well, that's not the way you laid out your data. So go out and look at some of the traditional stuff like relational technology, how to normalize data. Other thing is, once again, documentation, learn to write good documentation, have other people look at it. And the folks who get further in the world are the ones who write code and documentation so that someone else can understand what they're doing. Because that way your boss looks at you and goes, okay, their stuff is solid. I can actually move someone in there and they'll be able to comprehend what's going on. This person, if they're tackling new stuff all the time, I can move them on to some other new project.
Cool. So let's move on further. And now my question is to Katy. So Katy, so where do you see like CI/CD in next 3 years? Because CI/CD has got a drastic change in the last for let's say 5 years. So what do you see for the next 3 years?
This is like interesting because I was actually just having like a discussion with a lot of the engineers at Circle yesterday about this, because they're sort of right now, I feel like people are trying to decide if they want an all-in-one platform or a like vendor agnostic modular piece that works like anywhere. And I honestly think that like that's the decision that's going to be made in the next 3 years, although maybe it will take us 3 years to make it. I tend to think that it will go towards vendor agnostic, because I write my code in like a modular fashion, right? I like break it down to the smallest possible pieces because I know that if I write one super long main.js, which I've definitely never done, then like when something breaks in there, my life will be difficult. And I kind of think the same principle will apply to CI/CD tools. If I put everything in one platform and then that platform is unavailable in any way, then I have like this massive single point of failure. So I kind of think that we're going to edge towards saying like, what's the smallest possible change I can make? And then what is like, how often can I make it? Which I think is like a pretty common, right, engineering philosophy. And they apply across the board, right? So like the idea of continuous integration is that you make small changes, you make sure it works. Make small changes, make sure it works. And I think that like the idea of adding in this like more massive platform doesn't always sort of jive with that idea. So I think that's a little bit where we're headed, but also we're really in the next 3 years going to be realizing, I think like our current times are telling us how important CI/CD is, right? This idea of like reliability in the time of a pandemic is incredibly important, as I'm sure Ted works with observability, I'm sure he knows too. It's this idea that like you need to make sure things work, especially like the more important it is for your users, right? So if like you have healthcare, then like you're gonna need like you don't just want to like think about continuous integration, you want to implement it because it matters. And I think, you know, all of our software, regardless of whether it's like life-saving, matters to us and it matters to the business, of course. So I think that like we're gonna see that adoption, just like a philosophical, like this is a requirement. And then also we're gonna start deciding where the tools themselves fit in our larger architecture.
I think we're also going to see more robustness in like that whole pipeline. Like a lot of the things that had happened with CI/CD over the last like few years are like head and shoulders better than what we had before. But the tools that fit into that are also that way. Like I'm thinking about like Cypress, for example, like the way that like Cypress runs inside of like a CI/CD pipeline is like really incredible, and it can do so much for you. And we didn't have that a while ago. So the whole like testing ecosystem is like moving upward beyond just like the core vendors you think of like Circle CI. And I also think that we'll have like a move towards more abstraction there. We've kind of already had that with like cloud things with Terraform. So I don't think it's unreasonable to expect it's like the equivalent of that with CI/CD.
Right. Any other thoughts from the panel on this? Okay, so we'll go ahead. So now let's go to database, right? Dave, I think that when I say database, I think I see a smile on your face. So in database today, there are many databases, technologies you keep seeing day to day. Like we started with relational and then we ended with NoSQL, and today you have various serverless platforms coming in, right? So what do you see for next 5 years or 3 years?
Well, relational technology is going to be around forever. It's the basis of all business logic. So if you get a chance to study data normalization, relational theory, set theory, and all that, you'll even hear relational calculus. Don't be worried by the words. They're just ways to organize your data. That's going to be around forever. Now, about 10 years ago, when the NoSQL databases reappeared, by the way, before they had relational databases, they had NoSQL databases. They just didn't call them NoSQL databases.
VSAM.
The NoSQL world introduced the idea, well, I don't really need to do all that structure. I don't need to set up relations. I don't need to do that. And it's a lot faster for me if I'm not tied down by all this tradition. Well, that's true. And the funny thing is all the major relational databases have added NoSQL functionality. For instance, MySQL can act as either a relational database or a NoSQL JSON document store. And you can get the data from one side to the other side. It's all the same platform, all written on the same data type. Makes it easy peasy for you to do that. Meanwhile, some of the non-relational databases, NoSQL databases, have been trying to add transactions, which they're finding very, very difficult even after several years of effort. So go out and learn how databases work. Once again, big secret with databases is make backups and then make more backups. What you're going to see in the next 5 years that I think you're going to see is everyone's running to the cloud. Unless you have some sort of HIPAA requirement or some other government requirement where you have to keep your stuff on premise. The cloud makes everything so cheap. The original birth of relational databases was because they had very expensive disk drives and they did not want to duplicate data. It was original deduplication effort. Well, now that disks are cheap and memory is fairly cheap and now processes are cheap and the networking is cheap, you're going to see more and more data stored out there in a variety of formats. So you're going to see more of everything, and it's just going to, the tumult's going to increase. Now, the vendors are trying to help you out with some tuning tools on the back end where they do some machine learning. Gee, at this amount of load and this amount of queries, this is what your data looks like. But now the data load is going up higher and there's more transactions going on. So how do we tune the back end for you? You're going to see a lot more automation that way. On the user end, it's just going to, for you folks out there writing front end stuff, trying to write the back end stuff, it's just going to get more messy or messier. So hold on to your hats, document what you're doing, and write good code.
As far as database technologies is concerned, I'm going to kind of co-sign what David just said there. It's not going anywhere. And if you look at it in the realm of computing sciences, developers, we don't exist without some form of data whatsoever. And databases within itself, its area can get, kind of messy and get kind of complex, but very intriguing as well. We are going to continually have to deal with understanding how to utilize and leverage data. Hey, some of the biggest companies on earth right now exist simply because of data. Well, we look at Google. If anybody started utilizing them 20 years ago, when they were first coming out, it was kind of interesting how they were able to just pull up all the data that they were and then look at the beast that they are now. We are all familiar with the beast that is Amazon, which many of us probably wouldn't have survived without its deliveries throughout this pandemic. But these companies exist because of data, and the data that they get to realize, and even other organizations as well, they lean and depend on data for creating up different types of different business models and how to leverage the businesses that they have, and basically how to generate more revenue. Data is always going to exist out there, whether it be in the form of NoSQL, relational databases. We just have to come to a understanding and recognizing that, hey, we exist. It's coding and data is like first cousins. We code to get the data, and data needs to be utilized because of the coding that we utilize. So in the future, hey, it's going to become more intriguing and interesting. I mean, the biggest thing out there, the fresh face out there now is what, GraphQL. That is a big player out there, very interesting. I've dabbled with it, being that jack of all trade. Very interesting, but we'll see what comes after GraphQL. But we have to come to a realization that database technology is something that has a huge future ahead of it.
I would just add too that there's some emergence of like specialty databases too. So for example, when I say I worked at a database company, I worked at a time series database company, which is like its own special little corner of the world. So I think too, I don't think you need to learn them all, but I do think that like, as you're getting like further along in your career, it's really good to be aware that like, there are more types of databases than probably any of us care to know about. maybe except for me, because I do really like them, I do. But yeah, just being aware that there are like lots of specialty databases out there, and like I agree that they exist for a reason. And it's really interesting to learn about the reasons that they exist and the problems that maybe like come up in traditional databases that like spur the birth of like something so niche. So it's a good thing to just be aware of and keep your eye on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Katie on that. I work at a company where like we're very invested in data, like observability and making sure things are running and all that. We have like around 6 different kinds of data stores. Like we have like a regular MySQL like thing, and then we have a bunch of different databases that we've built to handle the kind of data that we have. And the thing that has like helped with that is that we spend a lot of time on our interfaces between like the different services and the front end and the back end, and that makes it easier to like swap out the underlying persistence. So I would say that like just as important as being thoughtful about like the database choice and the database design is being thoughtful about the APIs, especially if you have public APIs, because those are extremely hard to change. So putting thought into that can give you more flexibility to respond to changes, whether it's like maybe outgrowing like your database or outgrowing what you want to pay for your database.
Cool. So that's a great information on database. Like everyone understands that without data, excuse me, without database, there is no web, right? So we need data and we need web technologies which support database. And Cliff, you used a good terminology like web and data are like cousins, right? So they go together. Cool. So my question now to Bhavin. So Bhavin, what do you think about low code space, and do you think the traditional developers are going to be impacted because of low code, or do you think it as an opportunity for developers to embrace the change and use low code technologies to develop solutions faster and deliver solutions faster? What is your take on that?
So obviously I'll be biased, right?
Right.
But at the same time, when I was looking into low code, and again, low code is not a new technology, right? And now it's in the forefront. But if you look at it from Access to Lotus Notes to SharePoint, all that has some sort of low code concept, right? And the philosophy behind it is from the beginning is we have looked at productivity for every single industry, every single job. Just look at all across, right, man? From manufacturing to back office, everywhere we look, there was a big word, productivity gain since 2000, right? For next 10 years, we focus so much on our productivity, which is actually a good thing, right? When we produce double the cars today with same amount of labor force, actually, right? So that's a productivity gain gets you. One thing we never looked at is the productivity for developers, right? It's not replacing a developer. It's more of a how can we complement a developer to make things faster, right? And again, demand is not slowing down. So if it slows down, certainly the value of the technology goes down, right? Because if, let's say, tomorrow you need 500 million applications, which Microsoft says they'll need, when world will have 500 million new applications in the next 5 years, right? Gartner is kind of predicting this in the same line. If the productivity, if the demand goes down, which all of us know that's not going to happen, right? Then how can we make that process faster to take your solution to the market faster? And if you look at the technology trend itself, right? If it takes about 18 months to 24 months to take your solution or your product to market, you're already legacy, right? 18 months is eternity in technology today, right? It is eternity, right? 18 months later, you have no idea what's gonna be, right? I mean, just take an example of Uber, right? Uber was this groundbreaking technology, if you will. It's concept rather than technology, right? But because of their nimbleness and to deliver things faster, think of that how fast they can get the market share, right? When I remember back in February, Uber Eats valuation was very low, and then all the DoorDash and everybody else. But because Uber can integrate that faster into their app, because that's what they are providing at the end of the day. And if they are the first mover, you can capture a lot of market share, right? So that's the value there, right? And in terms of developer hesitation, yes, I completely understand that. As an engineer, we are one of those species who are always a little hesitant about change, right? But I guess my analogy to that change is my parents' generation was working in maybe not necessarily my parents, but myself worked in COBOL, right? My parents' generation worked in assembly language, right? And then there was a flood of high-level language called C and Java, a number of different variation of it. Now we have more of a client-side technology in JavaScript and all that, right? So that change is gonna happen, right? But if you look at low code in general, it's one abstraction of that high-level language, right? So what you are doing is you are still using your analytical engineering mind to build out a product which solves real-world problem, but at the same time let machine do the rest of the work, which is just converting that into, let's say, high-level language, and then at the end of the day, it's assembly level language, right? So it's just one abstraction of it, just next evolution, if you will, right? So I see it as a complementary to anybody's skill set, right? Because if I say I have built so many projects in my resume, sure, it looks good, but very high level, if you look at from management or product manager perspective, if I say I deliver this project in 2 months, that's even better, right?
Right.
I kind of like to when you mention low code, you know, if you talk to anyone from management, they always want to throw in low code, no code, and we always know that the no code aspect of it is a fallacy. It's always going to be some level of code associated with it. From those of us who are developers, I personally, I'm neutral to the low code. I've dealt with working at Alliance. I haven't deal with Salesforce and other applications like that. See it less as a threat and more of an opportunity, because it definitely can help out the business to get things out quicker and faster out the market. However, every organization is different, and there's going to be some level of customization that needs to be done. And then that's where the developer comes into play with helping out that aspect of what needed to be done from a business standpoint to get to market faster. But in order for the organization to really leverage it, the developer comes in to utilize the specialization programming language, Apex, or what it may be, if it's Appian, Sail, in order to tweak things so that the actual aspect of revenue is generated. So going forward, developers shouldn't fear the low code that exists out there. We should embrace it. We should look at other opportunities out there to to learn from it and see what we can do from a customization or low level standpoint in order to improve it, and just literally build up our skill set.
Being the probably the oldest person on the panel, I can tell you that when I started programming, everything had to be customized. There was not a lot of packages you could buy, install, and run. Usually you're buying them from your hardware vendor. And then the idea of prepackaged software started coming up, Peachtree accounting, all these other things. The only trouble is companies had those packages, but they didn't like them. They didn't fit what they needed to have done. So they started hiring programmers to come through and customize them. Once you do that, you're kind of locked into that version, that release, and very, very expensive to have vendor lock-in. That's why open source software really exploded, because the hardware vendors and their software prices were escalating every year, and you were locked in, you were stuck, you could not move, you could not progress, period. So the government said, okay, from now on, we're going to do something called COTS, common off-the-shelf software. You're going to be able to buy packages and run them, minimum customization, and that the pendulum swung back that way, so you're buying stuff off the shelf and not modifying them, which of course worked for about 6 months before people realized, you know, our accounts receivable are just a little bit different. We need to have it go this way. So what happens is you see swings back and forth. And of course, the fastest code you can write is the code that never has to execute. So it's one of those nasty things where developers get caught. Well, how do I optimize this? And you have the old timers like me who will come back and tell you, well, optimize it for the poor SOB that has to come after you, who has to keep it working. You might find one optimization that works on today's hardware that's not going to scale in the future. So if you're given a choice between all-out performance and something that is maintainable, go for the maintainability. If you're in a situation where you really, really need that extreme low return time from your application or your function, go for it, but document the heck out of it, because the pendulum's going to swing and it's going to go back the other way one of these days.
Yeah, there's also something else, like between the lines here, as like engineers were not really paid to write code, we're like paid to solve problems. So the way that we do that is like, you know, it's how we specialize and all that. It's important and interesting, but it's important that we're actually solving problems. And if we're doing that with like low code things or writing a ton of code, it's just important that we're doing what we need to do and being flexible in that way.
Cool. So our last question here is just an open one. It's always a fun one that I like to ask, and I think we've touched on it briefly throughout this conversation, but what is the future of web? What do you all see as the future of web? And from any, you know, kind of take that at whatever scale you want, but just curious on your thoughts.
One word: inescapable. I hate to say it, but you know, we all carry these funny little devices, and when they dig up our society, whatever archaeologists in the future find us, they're going to find these little prayer devices that we communicated to our gods with, and they're going to see that we had everything interconnected multiple ways, and there was no way to get away from it.
I definitely think it will be interesting to see how we either adopt or don't ML or AI, right? Because we're already seeing it in lots of different ways incorporated into the web, but we don't necessarily see positive responses to it all the time, right? So I think it's part of the future, but I don't know to what extent, because I think that like there's always a possibility of like pushback, especially when you see how like biased it is, how just incorrect it is. But then like I hope that the future of web is more accessible. I think right now we spend a lot of time building things that a lot of people just don't have access to. And I think the more we think about accessibility, the more we build the web for everyone. And so I guess I hope that's part of the future. It's certainly part of what I will be bringing to my like career and encouraging other people to do so, because I think we have a lot of work to do to make the web a safer and like more accessible place for everybody.
I think I see the web, specifically the browser, becoming like even more robust, like runtime environment. The browser, like historically, has been like limited by being like single-threaded and not having like persistent storage and all these things that like HTML5 specifications have like kind of tried to address, and like workers have tried to address like the single-threaded stuff. We have like a limited amount of like monitoring and telemetry data that we can get out of the browser, like windowed up performance and stuff. So I think that we'll continue to see like advances in that way that allow us to have like more confidence and visibility into what's happening in the browser in the way that we do for our backend applications.
I certainly see that web is not going anywhere. That's for sure, right? But that's it, because it has a profound impact on our life, right? And the future human interaction is even today, my interaction, about 80 to 90% of my interaction because of COVID too, but it's through web, right? Because if you look at it right now, we are having this conversation through the web technology today, right now. So that's not going anywhere. I think as a responsible citizen of global citizen, I should say, there has lot needs to be done in terms of how can we use web not to only bring a positive change around the world, right? And make everybody's life easier, including myself, so I don't have to go to the bank to deposit a check, right? But at the same time, there has to be needs to be done on a flip side, where number one, a lot of people do think that they have not ridden this revolution of web, and they have completely left out. And then there is a certain population who completely thinks that web is totally evil. And the answer is somewhere in the middle, right? So I guess that's the thing. When all of us needs to figure out where we draw the line and where we can actually enhance everybody's life together, right? From technology perspective, I think Ted mentioned, right, man, they are getting smarter, right, man. If you look at from Netscape to now, I dare to say Microsoft Edge, but even Microsoft Edge, right? Even Microsoft Edge, it is getting better and better. So at certain point, you will see decline of individual, what we known as a mobile app today, right? You will see that decline as the web market or the browser becomes more intelligent.
It's going to continue to, it's not going anywhere. That's always been mentioned. It's going to continue to evolve. For those of us who were part of the web, when we had to deal with command lines such as whois, host, dig, and gopher. And now we see where the web is today. The web is still a wide open frontier. Individuals need to recognize and understand that as long as we are able to be interconnected, the web is going to allow us that opportunity to be interconnected. As Katie mentioned, hopefully in the future we'll reach out to the masses, more of the masses, those in third world countries, those even in our country itself. Given what we're going through right now with school districts open, we're starting to see a situation with between the haves and the have-nots, those kids that are going to be well educated and not left behind, and those that will. So those are the little things within society that are coming out to say, hey, where can we take the web? Where can we go with it? It's a wide open frontier. It's just going to take fresh minds, ideas, and just boldness to go out there and figure out what we need to do with it to continue to evolve it, pushing forward.
Yeah. So I think the future of web, every developer will be asked to write a definition of done, where there will be two test cases. One is to see whether that web page is having all accessibility rules met, and the other is whether the web page is able to be accessed in low bandwidth locations, right? So today, we as developers, we never think about the bandwidth while we develop. We commit the code and we think that everyone will have the same bandwidth to access our applications. But I think the future, we will be giving more importance to accessibility, where we make web for everyone, even they are in remote locations. Thank you all for your views today and taking part of the panel. And thanks, Brandon, who came in with me today to moderate as well. And thank you all for supporting us and supporting JavaScript and Friends Conference 2020. And we hope everyone is having a good learning opportunity today. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you for having us.
For having us.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Say hi to them at the sponsor booth. They are in Slack all day. You can go visit them and have any follow-up questions with them.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.